All right, y'all. So thank you for tuning into another episode of Full Circle Podcast. I want to thank you guys for bearing with me a little bit here. This is actually going to be part of what I'm talking about today. We've had so much going on in Los Angeles over the last few weeks. And the last time that I came to you on the podcast, from what I can see here, was back on June 4th, where we talked about everything that has been going on, at least in Trump's first 135 days. Since then, there were, of course, still protests going on where I film here in Los Angeles, and I was not able to get to the studio as a result of that. And so I just want to say my apologies on not being able to be available. I want to obviously continue to bring y'all content and really discuss what's happening in the world the way that I'm seeing it. Obviously, that's like something that's very, very important. So it's just been absolutely crazy because in literally 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, so much has happened that I now have to add to our conversation. And so I'm excited to come to talk with you about this today, but I'm also very concerned about the state of the country and where things are headed. So I just want to be very, very honest with y'all, set the tone. Once again, if you've been listening to the podcast, if you do listen, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support. And once again, if you listen to this episode, if you haven't heard it, haven't listened, I love to say it is free to support a nigga unless you decide you want to do more. We're always here to answer any questions you have and connect with you as well. So please go ahead and subscribe. It is absolutely free 99 with a click. That being said, on our last episode of the podcast, we talked a little bit about a few things, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap. We talked about the 142 executive orders that Donald Trump has put in, and we questioned, as many people are questioning, why is Donald Trump using executive authority despite having full congressional control? The House, the Senate, and of course the presidency, with the majority, conservative majority in the Supreme Court. So we talked a little bit about that. We talked about the elimination of federal DEI programs, including equity-focused grants, LGBTQ workplace protections, and minority student loans. And of course, we talked about why DEI matters and the whole reason why we've had to have it in this country to begin with. And thirdly, we discussed the reinstated tariffs on China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. They're raising prices for consumers, squeezing small businesses, and hurting U.S. farmers through retaliation. Another thing we talked about, and this is really where we were starting to kind of turn the corner before things started getting a little crazier here in Los Angeles. The immigration crackdown under Project Homecoming. We talked about how there's been a 40% spike in ICE raids, 150,000 plus deportations, $1,000 self-deportation program, and cruel targeting of asylum seekers and protected status immigrants, all while labor shortages have been worsening. We talked about violation of court orders, aggressive DOJ overreach, stories of cancer-stricken 2-year-olds that were deported, and threats to habeas corpus, which we will talk more about today. And then, of course, foreign policy volatility with what's been going on with Ukraine, which seems to be, honestly, like a little bit of an afterthought given what has happened recently with the strikes on Iran, or Iran rather. And so we'll talk about that today as well. And then just finally, the moral and legal crisis surrounding the disregard for the rule of law, the disacknowledgement and the seeking to discredit the press for asking genuine and honest questions. And of course, firing dissenters, getting rid of people that have any sort of criticism of His Highness himself. And of course, the consolidation of executive power. Now, as I said to you on the last episode, I intended fully to get back in the studio the following week and discuss part 2. And since then, so much has happened. And I want to dive into it very much so today on this special episode of, and I'll have him say it himself in his own words of,
what the hell is going on?
That's right. What the hell is going on? We don't know. We're not sure. we have questions. So there have been a lot of commentaries about things regarding the job market in the United States and manufacturing, and that's where I want to pick up from where we last left off. When it comes to manufacturing in the United States, there's just been this whole big push and this whole talk about bringing back American jobs, bringing back manufacturing to America. When really the truth of the matter is that there are literally right now in the United States, and you can look this up, 500,000 plus jobs in manufacturing that are currently unfilled, not due to immigrants, but because Americans are either unqualified, unwilling, or they're geographically unable to do so. Tariffs are actually going to hurt Americans more than they will help because they're going to raise production costs and delay supply chains. We are already seeing this in places like Los Angeles, where I live, and we're seeing this in a bunch of port cities where you have ships that are just sitting full of goods, full of containers worth of goods, shipping containers worth of goods, and they're just sitting there because some people don't want to offload them because of the cost of the material. Trump himself has already said that this is going to be a situation that, and Scott Bessent, who is in charge, I believe it's the Treasury Secretary, if I'm not mistaken. Scott Bessent himself has said that this is going to be a thing which will cause Americans short-term pain. Donald Trump was on the record saying, "Oh, if a beautiful 11-year-old baby girl," which I'm not really sure if an 11-year-old is a baby girl, but he's like, if she wants $30, she can maybe have, less than that, maybe a couple. Now, I don't know anybody that has $30, but the bottom line is that I thought Republicans were the party that was anti the nanny state. I thought they were the party that was all about freedom. Back when Obama was president, the whole narrative is, why are you telling us what to do? Why are you coming for, our soda machines in schools and telling kids how much soda they can have in their, drinks when we had the obesity epidemic that was happening in America? That was something to actually save the lives of children because we kept talking about the problem that we were having with obesity, but yet we were doing absolutely nothing critical to stop it. In this particular context, now we have a president. We have a president who is literally saying that before, the shelves are going to be stocked. We're never going to run out of anything when I'm president. And now we're potentially talking about shelves being emptied the same way that they were back in 2020 because of a major amount of mismanagement of the way that pandemic went. So we're looking at a lot of different things here. We're looking at the fact that if you're currently looking at the workforce reality, and this is just anybody with eyes, ears, and a pair of eyes, a pair of ears, and a brain. Anybody that's looking at this will literally be able to tell you, without immigration and infrastructure, this promise that we're making just rings hollow. Because even Haitian people that were coming to the U.S. as refugees originally, and then turned around and pretty much have become residents by this point, they are some of the skilled workers. Folks that are coming from Mexico, coming from Latin American countries, they are some of the skilled workers that are working in these environments, in manufacturing, in hospitality, in construction, in farming and agriculture. And if we lose that, we are going to have a major shortage. We're already starting to see it, a major shortage in the job market. Donald Trump himself hosted a press conference in which he stated that we were having a major gap. This was a few weeks ago, having a major gap in the farming industry. These policies are hurting farmers. And now he's saying we may have to go back to the drawing board and revisit our policy. But we could have avoided all of this to begin with. Now, I want to just say this for the record, and I'm going to talk about this in the next segment right after this. I do believe that we need to have strong borders. Without strong borders, without laws, you don't have you really don't have a sovereign country. It doesn't make any sense. And so I do believe that in many ways, this whole conversation that if you are pro people being treated with empathy, you don't believe in strong borders, that is a false choice narrative. right? Like, it's not either strong borders or empathy. There is not so much about what we desire here that needs to be executed, but it's about the way that we go about handling the very thing that we want to be executed. And so that, for me, I believe, is very important here because, yes, if there are people that are committing crimes, yes, if there are people that are, they're doing things illegally, they need to be held accountable. They need to see a judge. And if that is the case, then they do need to be deported. But when folks are here seeking asylum and we are not doing the bare minimum to hire more asylum judges to hear these cases and to fix our broken immigration system, then we can't then turn around and punish people that are contributing to our society off of some either white replacement or great replacement theory narratives or off of some white nationalist talking points and disguise it as patriotism, nationalism, and Americanism, because it's disgusting, it misses the point, it's despicable, and it absolutely destroys the very fabric of what this country claims to be built on. And so, as I'll say this, you can't bring jobs back to America if nobody is being trained to do those jobs. And if you want to know more about this, you can look at the BLS jobs opening report and the Economic Policy Institute about this. There's so much research I'm just talking about manufacturing because I don't have tons of time today to talk about this particular issue. But if you want to know more about this, just go look up those two places. It's a great place to find some information on it. Moving forward, another thing that we've been seeing, and I talked about this last time, but the ICE Project Homecoming raids, as we talked about, were ramped up to 40%. What has been happening now in recent times, first you had ICE agents that were going through, and ICE agents were going around and they were going around and they were engaging in, these roundups and raids, or of course trying to get people to, self-deport. I have some notes here, but there's a whole situation where a man literally in Sunnyside, Washington, for example, had just claimed, and this is a very interesting thing here, he claimed that ICE would literally pay up to $1,500 per person bounty for if they were to bring people in. A self-proclaimed bounty hunter said in a news conference in Sunnyside, Washington, that Immigration and Customs Enforcement would, quote, deputize bounty hunters, paying them up to $1,500 for each person without permanent legal status in the U.S., which they detained. Okay? So now, currently, there has not been specific evidence found of this matter, but there have been a lot of people coming out saying that this has been happening. And so this, of course, has been circulating around the internet. Now, the reason why I believe that it's possible these claims could be circulating is because there are people that have been arrested or they're being pulled over and they're not being offered or issued or they're not being no one's saying a warrant or declaring that they have a visible or a legal warrant from a court. They're getting some paperwork from Homeland Security, but they're not actually getting a warrant. There have been reports of people showing up without a badge, without any identification, and they are just indiscriminately taking people from flower stands or people that it might be selling fruit or food on the street. And this is the state of affairs in the country. Now, I do want to say this. It is very strange to me in this case that there are folks that I've had folks tell me this. Oh, well, Joseph, this is, if we have to deport these people, if they're illegal, we have to deport them, which, I don't believe anyone is illegal. I believe that people might be undocumented, but I don't think anybody's illegal. You can be doing an illegal action. By definition, no human being is an illegal person. So let's just get that straight. Secondarily, when it comes to this matter, President Obama specifically deported more people. I believe it was over 3.5 million people. I believe him and Joe Biden combined hold a very high record in regard to that, if I'm not mistaken. With that being said, you didn't have all these ICE protests going on. You didn't have all these indiscriminate raids that were happening. You didn't have all these targeting of individuals just willy-nilly, which some of it in many ways seems targeted more so to the point of these people appearing to be mostly Latino. And that is something that living in Los Angeles, I can tell you, has been, I saw it in my own neighborhood. ICE agents just coming through. And so there has to be probable cause. If we're going to do this, we have to follow the law. Because I believe that if we're following the law on these situations, if these people are actually getting a fair hearing, and if they're actually able to see a judge and it comes out that that's the case, okay. But the way that it's being gone about, that is why the country in many ways is resisting this. And yet still there are people that support Donald Trump on this particular situation and the way that it's being gone about, even when some of their families have been directly affected by these immigration rates. Also, I do want to say this. There are people that have heard, and this is something that I've heard directly, but there are people that have heard claims about Donald Trump talking about how, we only want to bring in the good immigrants. We want to bring in the people that want to come in legally. And there's this whole narrative about what just happened recently with genocide that's going on in South Africa. And I believe it may have been 50 or maybe a few more people that came in from South Africa that they're saying there's a genocide going on there because they're killing white farmers. Let me just set the record straight, please. There is not a genocide happening in South Africa. Let's just get that straight. There were people, of course, right now, there are farmers being killed. But right now, in South Africa, the poverty rate or the unemployment rate in South Africa for white folks, the Afrikaners who are descendants of Dutch colonizers, is 10% or under. For black South Africans, it is 34%. 70% of Afrikaners own the land in South Africa, and they're unhappy about land reform. But there are white farmers and black farmers being killed in South Africa. It just so happens to be that those white farmers are in the majority. And Donald Trump is calling this genocide. Let's not even talk about Gaza and what's happening over there. Because we already know that is a genocide. It is indiscriminate. It is indiscriminate killing of individuals. Now, I'm not talking about picking a side. I believe free the hostages. I do believe in that. And I've talked about that many times on this show. But you cannot look at what is happening over there in Gaza and tell me that that is okay. Because it's not. And that's a whole different conversation. But the bottom line with this particular conversation right over here is that there are 50 of these people. Donald Trump made this whole video welcoming them into the country while suspending refugee opportunities and status for those that are coming from Haiti, that are actually facing environmental and economic disaster, people coming from Venezuela who are facing political persecution, economic disaster, and people that are coming from Afghanistan. And when the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security was asked as to why, or I believe it was either the Homeland Security or the Interior, he was asked as to why, his response was, we're looking for people that can easily assimilate into the United States. Guys, this is code word. This is very clearly code word for we prefer the white people that are coming into this country to get priority. This is a problem. Donald Trump has also suspended immigration or travel rather to a multitude of African and Caribbean countries. Where's the actual concern about crises happening in the world? Where's the actual concern about people that are dying, about children that are being maimed and losing limbs and losing their lives and losing families and facing starvation? Where's the outrage over that? And this president surrounds himself with people like Laura Loomer and Nick Fuentes, who have been known to utter and believe in white nationalist tropes and beliefs and ideologies. What is wrong with this country? Truly, what the hell is going on? Because we are a nation of immigrants, and we are a nation of laws. But you can't have a broken system that you refuse to fix, that takes advantage of people and uses them for economic gain, and then turn around and talk about following the law. We got to change things. We got to change things. Moving forward, Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are talking about suspending habeas corpus under, quote, a constitutional clause that allows for this to happen in times of either war or invasion. So they have dubbed this as a migrant invasion of the United States. Now, if we assume something is an invasion, we are automatically assuming this is not normal or natural migration in the case of events that are occurring that would necessitate such an action. We are saying, if this is being said, that there is a purposeful intent, full of intent, or a concerted effort, if you will, to come into this country, and it's being touted as a sinister reason. As Donald Trump himself said, quote, on the campaign trail, quote, to prey upon innocent lives. And they're poisoning the blood of our country. However, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth because simultaneously, Donald Trump has bragged that border crossings went from millions of people coming into the country to now being down to 3 people a day. So how are you going to talk about suspending habeas corpus because of an invasion if you have border crossings under control? The math is not mathing. Like, this ain't adding up. It's not making sense. And if it doesn't make sense, if you look a lot closer, something is definitely not true. You cannot suspend the Constitution. You cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus for an invasion that is not happening. If you want to know more about what's going on with this, look up the Human Rights Watch on ICE tactics and the ACLU on habeas corpus threats. Moving on to our next section over here, because I've got a lot of things I want to cover while we still have a little bit of time. Right now, what is happening in terms of, and since we're still talking about the Bill of Rights for that matter, the Constitution, right, which Republicans have typically dubbed as like the Holy Grail and the secondary, the only thing secondary to the Bible, right? Small and critical outlets at the White House that are covering the presidency of Donald Trump, asking legitimate questions like, Mr. President, why did you accept the plane from the Qatari government for $400+ million, the jet? Why did you accept the plane when we have perfectly good planes over here? Why would you accept, especially knowing that those planes are likely to be bugged with surveillance? No one's just going to they're not going to give us a free gift. Donald Trump also himself said that the Qatari government had violated human rights in past times. And so he's like, oh, well, if I get first of all, he's like, you're fake news, fake news, fake news. All this fake news stuff, there's a difference between fake news when someone's making up a story and when someone is actually asking you a legitimate question that deserves accountability. When are we going to get back to requiring and demanding accountability from our public leaders and not allowing them to lie and say it's fake news, or when they lose an election to say it's fraud, but when they win an election, they don't say the same thing? When are we going to require accountability? Because that is the last line of defense when it comes to truth. And I know the media has been terrible in many ways. The media, these last couple of elections have really exposed the fact that the media in many ways is compromised, especially legacy media. But when you have independent media journalists that are calling for accountability and they're asking honest, real, everyday questions. And they're being lied to, or they're having their press badges taken, their credentials removed, access taken. And the White House starts a new media press briefing that's all surrounded by people that are on the right or people that are conservative. And those are the only people that are actually able to have conversations about what's going on. We are falling to a new level here because that's what's happening. Another thing, and I do want to say this, journalists and at protests have been detained too. They've been detained for covering things. There was an FCC memo that was recently leaked where podcasts and Substacks are flagged for surveillance now. If they're saying anything negative about the president, yours truly on this podcast, I'm just telling you right now, for me even doing this episode and talking about the things that I've talked about, just being honest. But it's not even about being honest, expressing my opinion. I'm likely and could likely get flagged. I don't care. And the reason why I don't care is because we're supposed to be a nation that is built on the freedom of speech, the freedom to speak our mind, the freedom to stand up to government and oppose it, verbally or otherwise, for a redress of grievances. This is the Constitution. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say the truth and I'm going to post content and I'm going to share it as much as I can, as long as I can. And I want to invite you to do the same thing. Anywhere that you see stuff that's wrong or where you see justice that is not being executed, you should speak out as well. Because if our fear of retaliation is greater than our fear of what is just and what is right, then we have lost all moral ground. We have lost all moral ground. We have to really get back to the facts of the matter because we are literally in the middle of a war on facts. And it's not just a war on facts, but it is a war on those who can best articulate those facts and who are welcoming open debate and conversation in the public square. Moving on here, I want to just talk to you guys about Iran currently and the march to war with Israel and the United States. So if you didn't know this recently, the United States dropped missile strikes from B-2 bombers on Iranian nuclear sites. They claim that they fully destroyed it, but there's another report that's coming out today that the White House obviously is angry at that says that that claim was absolutely false, that we did not totally destroy their program. We only set it back by a few months. Right now, there is retaliation already from Iran and the Houthis and Hezbollah that is reportedly underway. Israel was warned by Donald Trump to wait, publicly backed their aggression, turned around, stepped in front of Israel, and decided to do the bombing themselves. We already talked about the fact that in Gaza, they're already talking about removing people. And I don't know if they're going to follow through with this, but they're talking about clearing the entire place to build commercial centers for business and commerce, to call it the French Riviera, as he said, of the Middle East. And right now, because of the attack that happened, where many lawmakers were stunned on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, with some even on the right calling for an investigation and even Trump to be impeached as a result of this, they had no idea what was going on with this attack. And now the United States is on DEFCON level 3 alert, where they have a heightened terror alert right now in the United States because of this action. We have to be very, very aware that when it comes to any sort of military action in the United States, anything that we do, especially in Iran, we have to be very, very careful, because just going in there as a foreign power and dropping a bomb with the seal of the president behind it, this is consequential. This is not some joint task special force operation. This is the U.S. military flying into another country's airspace and dropping a bomb. This is serious. And what about the anti-war candidate? What about all the discussion on that? This is an action that could fully pull us into a conflict. There just seems to be so much that is happening right now that is uncertain. We're obviously going to continue to keep covering this here, but this is not foreign policy right now that we're seeing that is cooperative and considering and takes things into account. Of course, there's been criticisms and praise on both sides, mostly Republicans praising what has happened, but there have been Democrats that have come out and praised it too, with some Obama and Biden era political operatives claiming that this was a good idea. But I am very, very skeptical as to whether or not this ceasefire will hold, and I believe this has just added more chaos to the situation. Very concerning, because if that is the case, this could mean not just war, but this could also mean domestic terrorism at home. And that is very, very concerning. You can read more about this on the Council on Foreign Relations and BBC Middle East. I want to just say this lastly. I want to talk about two things. Right now, I've given a lot of criticism of the right. And I want to come to the left. As you guys know very well, I am neither a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an independent. But what we've seen on the right, whether it's the political violence, whether it's the sham claims of election fraud, so on and so forth, all of these things that have been happening. Of course, we know right now Donald Trump and the Republicans have claimed they wouldn't cut Medicare or Medicaid. They're actually cutting it. They're cutting it for 13 to 14 million while claiming that 1 million people that are illegal immigrants are receiving that. Even if you believe that claim. I don't believe the claim. There's no evidence for it. But even if you believe that claim, why would you then cut, stay with me, why would you cut 13 million, 12 to 13 million if only 1 million people are benefiting from it that are, quote, undocumented, quote unquote? The math is not mathing. We were told last year this was going to happen. But here is the problem that I have with the Democrats. Right now, the Democrats look weak. They look impotent. They don't have a clear leader. They don't have clear leadership. Now, granted, I supported Kamala Harris. Not only did I vote for her, but I campaigned for her in a battleground state because I did not believe and did not support, and I still don't believe and support what Donald Trump said and what he's doing. But Democrats, let me just say this. You can't win off of fear-mongering. You can't win off of just being like, hey, look over there. Look what those guys are doing. You can't win off of waiting for Donald Trump to fail and stirring up anger. Because I will tell you this. All these symbolic protests, all of the, we're going to wear certain colors at the State of the Union, weak court filings, no national resistance campaign, no centralized leadership, no actual plan, no mass mobilization like 2020, all this caution over confrontation, waiting till the midterms, trying to not see or trying to see if there's an advantage that you can get. There are people who are losing their jobs, people who don't have health care, people who are worried about the cost of food at the grocery store, people who are concerned about the futures of their family and the education of their kids and whether they can afford living. The fact that wages are down right now, the fact that people have to work 2 to 3 to 4, millennials like me, Gen Zers, they're concerned about those things. And it's not enough to just say, oh, Republicans have nothing for you. What do you have for the American people? Because right now you look impotent. And you thought it was going to be enough. You thought it was going to be enough for us to be like, oh, well, look, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, all this stuff, which he is. But you thought it was going to be enough for us to just hear that. You thought it was going to be enough that they were going to take away certain voting rights and steal elections. and get rid of a woman's right to choose. Where's your plan? What's your plan? And I'll just say this for the record, because I went out to some of the No Kings protests over the not last weekend, but the weekend before. I have never seen, like my brother put so succinctly, I have never seen people protest in lowercase more at that event that I've ever seen in my life. And there's something, I got to tell you, I appreciate the support that we are seeing right now from people from all sides, black, white, Hispanic, everything. I didn't see many black people at these protests. I didn't see a whole lot of Latinos. Obviously, this issue that's been going on with ICE has mostly affected a lot of Latinos. But let me tell you this. It is not enough, because I saw a lot of police, we're not going to block the street. We're not going to interrupt anything. We're just going to have this thing where we let people kind of cross the road and drive past and honk and everything. And then when it's time for the lights to go red and it's our turn to cross, we'll cross with our protest. It looked like a glorified homecoming party. It looked like our army had just won the war somewhere in a foreign land and was coming back home to celebrate. And if there's one thing about black people, as I've said before, I'm not pro the rioting and the looting and all that. But if there's one thing about our people, we know how to protest. You're not going to get national attention and a conscience that is changed and economic shifts. You got to block up some roads. Asking for permits and cooperating with the police when it comes to, like I said, peaceful protests, I'm all for. No violence. But when it comes to blocking roads, laying on the streets, blocking bridges like they did during MLK's day. That's what this is going to require. Not this soft, sappy, I checked off a little box, now let me go to brunch tomorrow on Sunday to talk about it. Or posting a black square on social media you can archive. Nah. None of these I can't even signs. No. That's not what happens when democracy is under threat. That's not what we do. We have to remember that protest was built on the backs of people who were beaten, who were bloodied, who were oppressed, who were denied freedom. And when we see opposition to those things, we have to risk the very same and show the overall public the institution that we are currently dealing with. You can't change the system while cooperating with the institution. You will fail every single time because you are complicit in the very thing that you seek to challenge. I'll leave you with this. Protests need 4 things at least. You need 25%. I call them the 4 quarters of protest. 25% indignation. Once again, no violence, no destroying things or looting, but you need anger. You need visible rage because of injustice that should not be occurring. 25% indignation. You need 25% inspiration. You got to inspire people. You have to encourage them. You need 25% celebration, the celebration of culture and what we are about as a people and our ideals as Americans. And lastly, you need 25% education, from the most educated person all the way down to the lay person. You have to be able to show them what is going on. Without that, it's a glorified party you call a protest. And that will not change anything in America. That's all the time that I have for today on the podcast. If you have a question, any thoughts about anything we've talked about, send it in to us at _fullcirclepod on Instagram and at fullcirclepod on TikTok. That's all the time that I have for today. Thank you so much for joining. And as I love to say, have a great one from your favorite brother. We'll see y'all next time.